A 12-cylinder German engine inside the pinnacle of English luxury. But if the car is expensive, the repair is expensive too. Let's take a look at a crazy repair and modification build on a Rolls-Royce Phantom 2005 model. First, make sure you're subscribed to us here, and let's get into this Royal English machine. If I told you a new version of this car could cost up to $500,000, you'd naturally assume the lowest price for the one in this video wouldn't be under $100,000. And that's just to guarantee the model, but that's not what happened here, because they managed to buy this one for just $30,000. Of course, it came with quite a few problems, and they considered it one of the cheapest examples of this model in all of America. We see them heading out on a trip to go pick it up, and they actually managed to close the deal and buy it, but the car doesn't run at all and won't even crank, though the lights and electrics work fine. They struggle to get it loaded onto the trailer and bring it back to their shop. Before they start working, let's talk about this car, because you simply can't skip past a 12-cylinder engine without discussing it. We're talking about a V12 producing around 453 horsepower, naturally aspirated, no forced induction whatsoever, delivering 720 Newton meters of torque sent through an 8-speed automatic transmission to a rear-wheel drive setup. And of course, the entire brand, across all its models, is famous for total stability and absolute silence, which is demonstrated through the famous coin standing test, where a coin literally doesn't move. Back to the repair. They bring the car into the shop, lower it off the trailer, then put it on the hydraulic lift to see what's going on underneath. It's clear there had been an impact or accident affecting parts of the suspension, leaving the left front wheel with a slight wobble when he moves it. When you open the trunk and lift the interior carpet, it feels like a control room. There are batteries and multiple modules in there dedicated to running the car. The key that came with it isn't the original. It's a BMW key that's been programmed to the car. When he asked the dealer about the price of an original key, he found out it was $1,600, which is of course a big number just for a key, but that's the price level we'll be dealing with throughout this entire video. He then takes measurements of the engine bay to see whether the modifications he has planned will have room to fit, because the engine here is visibly enormous. He lifts the car again for another quick look and decides to try rotating the crankshaft by hand to see if the engine turns freely, because if it won't rotate, that means there's a serious problem or a seized component inside preventing smooth rotation. He tries to do that, and the engine is completely locked solid. That's obviously not a good sign. He lowers the car and pulls the first spark plug, and what he finds is that the ignition tip of the plug is literally burned and melted. Everyone knows the difference between a plug that's come out like that and what a normal spark plug should look like. He inserts a camera into the engine to see the general condition inside, and what he finds is genuinely strange, because there's no piston visible at all, only the connecting rod. So, unfortunately, this V12 is completely finished, and realistically, even after major spending, this engine probably can't be made to run again, and a different plan is needed. He leaves the car for a few days and comes back once the new parts he ordered have arrived. The first thing to arrive is a set of new shocks for the beast. Then a new engine arrives in a large box, and now we'll find out exactly what it is. He starts opening the box, and what's inside is something nobody expected, because it's a diesel engine from a specialist company. We're talking about a straight 6 configuration, and the engine itself is turbocharged, producing around 325 horsepower and an absolutely massive 830 Newton meters of torque, because this is literally a truck engine. So the modification is going to be genuinely insane. He gets straight to work without wasting any time, and the first phase is pulling the original engine out of the bay.
He disconnects all the electrical connections at the sensors and the engine, which have their own dedicated section directly behind the engine. He lifts the car slightly, removes the wheel, and starts unbolting the subframe mounting bolts from their positions, so he has to cut and sever it completely before continuing to lift the engine. The engine stays sitting on the floor below. He disconnects and lifts the engine off the subframe and says this thing is now going to be his new coffee table, because it's a dead engine with no future. He brings the new engine underneath, and the size difference between the two is obviously clear. He first removes the cooling system, because the engine has a mechanical fan clutch cooling setup, and its design here is connected directly to the engine. He says that if he can manage to install the engine with its fans still attached without having to remove it, that would actually be a positive thing, because in his view, a mechanical fan like this is better than modern electric fans, and it's reliable in providing constant engine cooling, especially important since this is a diesel engine, not a petrol one.
He then positions the engine from underneath and starts lowering the car onto it until it finally appears appears inside the engine bay, and without any issues, and without needing to remove the fan at all. He lifts it again to sort out the remaining work, then starts removing the drive shaft from underneath and drops it. He then installs the front subframe and lowers the engine from above to identify the locations for the new mounting positions. He then goes to take proper measurements. At this point, a message arrives from the modification company, informing him that they'll be taking the engine back to carry out some modifications on it. The modifications and adjustments will cover several things, most importantly, replacing the block itself, along with the drive shaft, all the connecting rods, and fresh new pistons. So the plan shifted slightly. They'll now start taking the measurements they need while the engine goes off to be modified. Work begins, and the new mounting brackets are cut using a CNC machine with holes drilled in them to match the bolt positions.
They then lower the engine to weld everything into its final position, and this step requires some precision so the engine sits perfectly aligned. With that, the engine is solidly mounted in place. The next step is the transmission, because its mounting bracket also needs modification here. They drill new holes into it and start test fitting it to see how it'll look, and everything lines up with no issues. New parts arrive. The turbo kit for this beast as part of the build, along with a beautiful air suspension system and also a high-output fuel pump. Back to the work. This time, he's cutting holes in the chassis to mount the intercooler and connects the turbo's air pipes to it. The yellow panel is a rough mock-up so they can fabricate an exact replica, which will hold the air suspension system, and its location will be in the rear trunk area, looking exactly as shown. They get to work and actually build it, then polish it to a chrome-like finish, and finally mount the entire system onto it.
Of course, everything on this car is extremely expensive, to the point where a single wheel is listed for $6,000. He now cuts the front radiator support to modify and better position it, and creates a new dedicated mounting point specifically for the intercooler. Once done, he installs the cooler and fits the front grille. The new transmission now arrives, the gearbox they'll be running, and the spec they requested needs to handle the modifications that are coming. So we can say theoretically, this transmission can hold up to 1,200 horsepower. He removes the old one from the car and installs this one in its place, and now pretty much everything is present in the garage. The electrical connections are also almost fully connected. The next step is mounting new tires on the wheels, because when he bought the car, 3 of the tires were beyond saving. At that point, the welding work and fabrication of the needed components was progressing well, and the exhaust system design was also going to be ready very soon. He now goes through and fills all the fluids to check for any potential leaks, because he wants to catch and fix any issues at this stage before taking it out on the road.
He confirms the battery has charge by connecting an LED light, then tests the software, which has its own dedicated screen for control. He tries to start it, and the engine actually cranks, but cuts out shortly after because there wasn't enough fuel supply. The next day, the throttle pedal arrives, and he connects it underneath to see if the engine will run properly. But even with it connected, the engine still cuts out on its own. He checks the electrical connections, sensors, and wiring harness to find the problem, but discovers that this new system has something called a security key, which is essentially a security dongle, and it's simply missing. Since they don't have it, they try to work around the problem, but his mind isn't getting anywhere on it at that moment. He searches and manages to find a new controller that will at least let him start the engine. He tries 3 different controllers, and on the third one, yes, the car actually starts, and in a very exciting moment, the engine sound fills the space in an imposing way. He checks the oil, tries revving the engine, and the distinctive diesel sound is clearly different from anything you'd normally hear in this car. In the excitement, he wants to take it outside the shop for a very quick run, but it's funny here because he has no brakes or even a throttle pedal. So he takes it just outside the shop door to grab a few photos, nothing more. He then connects the brakes and mounts the throttle pedal in its position, but that part isn't filmed because it went quickly, and then takes it out for the real test run, moving it without a hood. The engine sound is obviously bizarre coming out of a Rolls-Royce. He gets it onto a main road and the car drives perfectly normally, then heads back to the shop because he has a few more observations to address. In a funny moment, when he shuts the engine off and gets out, he notices the coolant reservoir is having a problem and spraying coolant. He lifts the car because he had sensed there was also a suspension issue, specifically in the section holding the main control arm connection, which had been slightly bent and wasn't straight and was definitely affecting the handling. He decides to straighten the chassis from below, but in a different way. He pulls the car out and puts it on the loading trailer, ties the problem section to a hook, and pulls it. And he actually manages to straighten it. Honestly, it's the first time I've ever seen anyone treat a Rolls-Royce in such an unusual way. He brings the Rolls back down off the trailer, and to show you just how heavy this car is, you can see the front of the truck lifting off the ground as the Rolls-Royce comes down off it. He brings it back into the shop to put it on the lift, inspect it, and tighten up the section he'd straightened. After tightening everything down properly, he lowers it again and takes it out to test whether any new issues will appear. He also takes it to get washed, and up to this point, everything is looking fine. And honestly, the sight of this thing on the road is completely unexpected for a luxury car of this caliber. Everyone who sees it is genuinely surprised. Even later, when he goes to a Mercedes dealership to look at a G-Class, the people there are clearly taken aback by the sight of it.
He then returns to the shop, confirms no new faults have appeared, and finally goes to fill up the tank and takes it out for one more quick run. And with that, this strange modification journey comes to an end. Thank you so much if you made it this far. Don't forget to subscribe to us here and let us know in the comments, what's the strangest thing you've seen from Weston Champlin so far on our channel?